This is Chuck Cecil with the 11th of a 12-hour remembrance of Glenn Miller, the man and his music, featuring the records and the people who were there with him, making music and memories.
I got along with him fine, up until, when the band was going to break up.
And I was with Glenn until he joined the Army, September 42.
He didn't play a lot of solos because he knew if he played a ballad solo, he was going to be compared to Tommy Dorsey, and he knew if he played a jazz solo, he was going to be compared to Teagarden or somebody, so he played section work, and he was a good, strong trombone player.
Glenn Miller recording session number 66, RCA Victor Studios, Hollywood, California. The session was held the second day of April, 1942, while the band was still working on the film Orchestra Wives. Jerry Gray's arrangement of American Patrol would result in another million-selling record. Skippy Martin continued to play lead alto.
If I can be frank, one reason that we weren't really close is because he wanted me to write. And now I wouldn't have had any trouble, but in those days I wasn't. I kept hearing how the band would play maybe something that I would write, and I started 3 arrangements, and I never could. I never finished one, you know, and I think he frankly resented it a little.
From this point on, Miller records would no longer be released on the 35-cent Bluebird label, but on the 75-cent RCA Victor label. It didn't slow a bit. The demands for records by Glenn Miller, Memory Maker.
B, C, D, E, F, G, H. I got a gal in Kalamazoo. Don't wanna boast, but I know she's the toast of Kalamazoo. Zoo, 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 zoo. Years have gone by. My, how she grew. I liked her looks when I carried her books in Kalamazoo. Zoo, 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 zoo. I'm gonna send a wire, hopping on a flight, leaving today. Am I dreaming? I can hear her screaming. Hi, Mr. Jackson, everything's okay. KGIL-AM Oh, what a girl, a real pipperoo. I'll make my bid for that freckle-faced kid I'm hurrying to. I'm going to Michigan to see the sweetest girl in Kalamazoo. Kalamazoo. K-A-L-A-M-A-Z-O. What a girl, a real pipperoo. We're going to Michigan to see the sweetest gal in Kalamazoo. Zoo, 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 zoo.
Kalamazoo, featuring the voices of Tex Beneke, Marion Hutton, and the Modernaires. A million-selling record made on the 20th of May, 1942, just as the band was ending its work on the Orchestra Wives film. The Mac Gordon, Harry Warren compositions for that film dominated recording session number 67 in the Hollywood studios of RCA Victor.
At last, my love has come along. My lonely days are over, and life is like a song. At last, the skies above are blue. My heart was wrapped in clover the night I looked at you. I found a dream that I can speak to, a dream that I can call my own. I found a thrill to press my cheek to, a thrill I've never known. You smiled, and then the spell was cast, and here
Ray Eberly singing the words to At Last, another hit from session number 67. Trombonist Paul Tanner remembered Glenn Miller was featuring his own trombone playing less and less.
We all learned a lot from him, and he didn't play a lot of solos because he knew if he played a ballad solo, he was going to be compared to Tommy Dorsey, and he knew if he played a jazz solo, he was going to be compared to Teagarden or somebody, so he played section work, and he was a good, strong trombone player, and I learned a lot from him, I really did, and so did the other fellows.
Serenade in blue, I'm somewhere in another world alone with you, sharing all the joys we used to know many moons ago. Once again your face comes back to me, just like the theme of some forgotten melody in the album of my memory. Serenade in blue. It seems like only yesterday, a small cafe, a crowded floor, and as we dance the night away, I hear you say forevermore, and then the song became a sigh, forevermore became goodbye, but you remain in my heart. So tell me, darling, is there still a spark, or only lonely ashes of the flame we knew? Should I go on whistling in the dark, serenade in blue?
Kalamazoo, At Last, Serenade in Blue, 3 of the 5 sides from recording session number 67. Within a week, filming would be finished, and the band would take the eastbound Union Pacific, playing at military installations in the central states. The commercial broadcast would continue. Over 100 radio stations were now carrying live broadcasts by Glenn Miller, Memory Maker. The night of June 2nd, 1942, the Glenn Miller Orchestra had already played and entertained servicemen at the Navy Pier in Chicago and Fort Sheridan, Illinois. Now they were broadcasting from the Great Lakes Naval Training Station. Next night, June the 3rd, new recruits at Camp Grant in Rockford, Illinois were treated to music by Glenn Miller. following night, the Miller Band would put on another show at Fort Custer in Battle Creek, Michigan, then a series of one-nighters. The Trianon in Toledo, Lakeside Park in Dayton, Myers Lake in Canton, the Sunset in Carrollton, before returning to New York. But the visits to Army and Navy bases may have already left their mark on Glenn Miller, Memory Maker.
Baby, what's wrong with you? I can't get along with you. When it comes to romance, you're never in the mood. I say yes, you say no. I say stop, you say go. Lately, honey, I can't understand your attitude. If you don't thrill me like you used to thrill me, that's sabotage. You don't kiss me like you used to kiss me, that's sabotage. When you hear sirens screaming, those be alert alarm. Don't run helter-skelter, there's a bomb-proof shelter in my arms. If you don't thrill me like you used to thrill me, that's sabotage. Some fifth-column jerk did his dirty work and changed your mind about me. I can't sleep, I've got to keep my FBI on you. 'Cause if you've been untrue, that's sabotage. Some fifth-column jerk did his dirty work and changed your mind about me. I can't sleep, I've got to keep my FBI on you. 'Cause baby, you become a habit. Please don't go and try to grab it. If you've been untrue, that's sabotage.
Recording session number 68 was held in New York City, June 17th, 1942. That's Sabotage was another song written for Marion Hutton to sing in the film Orchestra Wives, but was left on the cutting room floor.
It was written with me in mind, and it was supposed to be in the picture that we did, Orchestra Wives. And what happened was, I guess it was either the War Department or someone who did the censoring at the time, you know, it was during the war, decided that it would be detrimental. And it really wouldn't have been, but you know, they were so careful about everything. And it was a big musical number in the picture. And it was the one that I had.
Session 68 found Ray Eberle making his last record with the Miller Band.
Yesterday's gardenias, we said goodbye to happiness, but not yesterday's gardenias. So I try to recapture the rapture of one night of bliss and press yesterday's gardenias with a kiss.
Yesterday's Gardenias recorded June 17th of 42. Some said singer Ray Eberly was fired by Glenn Miller a few days later because he showed up late for a broadcast.
This is not true. I quit. We had done a picture called Orchestra Wives before. We were, at the time I quit, we were in the College Inn in the Chicago Hotel, Sherman Hotel in Chicago. And the weekly checks were coming around, and then on top of that were the picture checks. And everyone in the orchestra got their picture checks except me. And I said, "Hey, Glenn, where's my check?" He said, "I'm sorry, Harv, you're under contract, you don't get one." I said, "You want to bet?" So I left, just walked out of the room. This was about a half hour or so before we went on the air. And that's when you had to clear tunes for radio. And I walked out and I went upstairs. And they sent John O'Leary up, the manager, and he sent everyone up to try to get me back down, but I wouldn't come back down. So Glenn never in his life fired me.
Of Glenn Miller's 71 commercial recording sessions as leader, we have now heard from 68. This is Chuck Cecil with those original recordings, something representative from each of those sessions, plus interviews with the musicians, singers, and arrangers who helped make the records for Glenn Miller, Memory Maker. Recording session number 69. It was held July the 14th, 1942, at the Victor Studios in Chicago. Caribbean Clipper. It found lead alto man Skip Martin still feeling like a newcomer to the Glenn Miller Orchestra.
I didn't get to know him very well. We weren't close. I was only around the last 10 months of the band. And, of course, we traveled some, and he was busy with his life, and I was busy with mine, you know. And I will say that he had good musicians. I wasn't as happy musically as I was with Benny, frankly.
From a musician standpoint, Miller may not have been in the same league as Benny Goodman in the idiom of swing, but for the construction of romantic moods, he had few, if any, equals.
Nothing could save me, fate gave me a sign. I know that I'll be yours come shower or shine. So I say, dearly, dearly beloved, be mine.
New vocalist for Glenn Miller, Skip Nelson, joining the Modernaires for Dearly Beloved. Another of the four sides made it session number 69 by Glenn Miller, Memory Maker.
The transportation situation was just terrible at the time the band broke up. I mean, you know, you couldn't, no more chartered buses and things like that, and you had to ride trains, and sometimes you'd sit on an instrument for 500 or 600 miles. You know, you couldn't get a seat and so forth. So I think most everyone was kind of glad in some way to see the thing end because of the situation. I mean, of course, that the war brought on.
Transportation, such as it was, had gotten the Glenn Miller Orchestra to Chicago from New York, the band traveling by train. But there were other problems. Musicians were getting draft notices. There was an impending strike by the Musicians' Union against recording companies. But in a period of 3 consecutive days, Miller's band would record 13 sides, including a million-seller that featured Johnny Best on trumpet.
Mopping up soda pop Rickies to our heart's delight.
Dancing to swing-a-roo quickies, jukebox Saturday night.
Goodman and Kaiser and Miller help to make things right.
Make some hot licks with vanilla, jukebox Saturday night. They put nothing past us,
Me and Honey Land.
Making one Coke last us
till it's time to scram.
money we really don't need that.
We make out all right.
Let the other guy feed that jukebox Saturday night. After sipping a soda, we got a scheme. Somebody else plays the record machine. It's so easy to say pet names when you listen to the trumpet of Harry James.
If I didn't know why the roses grow, then I wouldn't know why the roses grow. Ooh.
Marion Hutton, Tex Beneke, and the Modernaires singing Jukebox Saturday Night. It was Glenn Miller recording session number 70, the 15th of July, 1942, Chicago. Billy May was there.
We got to Chicago in the middle of the summer. I guess it was in July, and I don't remember when the band was called, but we recorded. Boy, it was really hard because we were working the College Inn, I think, at the Sherman Hotel, and we were working there at night, and we were doing 3 Chesterfield programs a week, and we were recording at RCA Victor in Chicago. And sometimes we'd have to get up like at 9 o'clock in the morning. We worked till 2 the night before, you know, and it was really rough, but we got a lot of good records in there. Bill Finnegan wrote some really good arrangements, and that's when Skip Nelson was singing in the band. Ray Eberly had decided to leave right about that time. In fact, we knew about then that Glenn was angling around. He was. We would have all kinds of service people come down, and Glenn would have them, you know, as his guests. And one night it would be the Air Force, and the next night it would be the Army, and then it would be the Navy, and finally, I guess he picked on the Air Corps.
I should stay away, but what can I do? I hear your name, and I'm aflame with such a burning desire that only our kiss can put out the fire. For you're the lover I have waited for, the mate that fate had me created for. And every time your lips meet mine, darling, down and down I go, round and round I go, in a spin, loving the spin again, under that old black magic
That Old Black Magic, another of the 4 sides recorded in Chicago at session number 70. There would be one more civilian recording date the following day in the career of Glenn Miller, Memory Maker. For a Glenn Miller Orchestra, recording session number 71 would be the last for his civilian band. It was still Chicago, July 16th, 1942. Numbers recorded: I'm Old-Fashioned, A Pink Cocktail for a Blue Lady, Rainbow Rhapsody, Sleepy Town Train, and a Bill Finnegan arrangement of Gershwin's Rhapsody in Blue.
I just use the main theme, and it's the most familiar theme, with just a little touch of the beginning of it.
try and suggest the whole thing without getting in deep, that's all.
And you knew Bobby Hackett would do the cornet solo?
Yeah, Bobby was a great asset to that band.
I don't like to take credit for that solo because I was only reading what Bill wrote. And we know how well he wrote. So all I did was read it and try to put a little extra something into it. I hope it came out all right.
Rhapsody in Blue, and that was it. The final number for Glenn Miller's 71st and final civilian recording session, July 16th, 1942. Pianist Chummy McGregor had been on every session except the first two. His 5 years of close association with Miller gave him some insight into why Miller would give up the nation's most successful dance band and join the service.
Full-blooded Americanness, the will to stand up and be counted, to protest against the machinations of a devil like Hitler that moved him to enlist. He didn't have to go. He was over the age. He had all the selfish reasons in the world not to go, but he went. He was going to get his 2 cents worth in or out.
For his 2 cents worth, Glenn Miller would give up millions of dollars in motion pictures and recording contracts. Before going on to active duty, there would be a few more personal appearances and broadcasts, which will continue our story of Glenn Miller, Memory Maker. From Chicago, the band traveled to Detroit, Buffalo, Akron, Youngstown, Pittsburgh, Hershey, Atlantic City, New York City, Shrewsbury, Lewiston, Bridgeport, Salem, New York again, then Boston, Philadelphia, and then September 23rd back in New York City for a broadcast.
KGIL-AM again. A real flipperoo. I'll make my bid for that freckle-faced kid I'm hurrying to.
the sweetest gal in Kalamazoo. Zoo, 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 zoo.
And that's Glenn's version of I Got a Gal in Kalamazoo. And speaking of Miller, we're proud to say that GM has joined the Army. And since he has to report for duty soon, tonight and tomorrow will be the wind-up of Glenn's Moonlight Serenade.
Starting next week, in our regular spot, the nation's #1 trumpeter, Harry James, and his wonderful band will be playing for all you listeners. How about that, folks?
The following night, September 24th, the Miller Band would open its final stand at the Central Theater in Passaic, New Jersey.
They had it on the marquee, the farewell performance of the Glenn Miller Orchestra. And, it was kind of shaky, little, It would probably be no different today when something like that, as big as that was. You talk about people being #1 and they go down the drain, and that was probably the way it felt, that was the swan song, so to speak, It was a good feeling that at least you've been part of it for as long as it lasted. And it was a good feeling that the reason it was that it was ending, it was a kind of a good feeling too, because there were so many guys, and I'm convinced now that that Glenn Miller was sincere in his desire to do what he did. There was no showboating bit.
Jim Priddy was in the trombone section as the band made its final broadcast for their sponsors at the Central Theater.
One of the ink spots. If I didn't know. Boom, 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 boom.
Money, you really don't need it. We'll make out all right. Let the other guy feed that jukebox Saturday night.
That was Jukebox Saturday Night, and that lad that imitated Harry James really did a job. The reason? Because it was Harry James himself. Harry, come on over here and say something.
Well, hello, everybody.
Harry, naturally, we're very reluctant to give up our Moonlight Serenade. But since I got a date with Uncle Sam coming up, I can sincerely say I'd rather have you take over our regular Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday spot than anyone I know. So, next Tuesday, get to work, mister.
Well, Captain Miller, coming from you, that's an order. But seriously, Glenn, I'm sure everyone agrees with me that you're doing a mighty fine thing in joining the Army.
Thank you very much, Harry. That's swell. Folks, it makes me feel a little sad to leave Marion, Tex, Skip, the Modernaires, this wonderful gang of boys in the band, and all our friends listening. If there's a lot of swell guys in the outfit, I'm going in, and maybe all of us can get together again after this thing is over. In the meantime, I'll see you all in the Army, and we'll say goodbye.
Glenn Miller's final civilian appearance was made 2 nights later, September the 26th, 1942, at the same theater. Tex Beneke, who had been a mainstay in the band since the spring of '38, said that show never finished.
Everybody had a few drinks that night, because they knew it was the last of the band, and we were all very moody about the situation. Marion Hutton broke up, crying out on stage, and Glenn had tears in his eyes while he was playing My Buddy and some of those pretty things, and Hackett had tears, and we all felt bad, and all the kids at the theater. This was the old Central Theater in Passaic, and we never did finish that show. We didn't finish it. We had to close the curtains in because everybody was so broken up about it, including the audience.
And so the orchestra of Glenn Miller disbanded. Miller joined the Army Air Corps as a captain. Some of the men went to other bands. Some, like trumpet-playing Zig Zarchi, would join the Army and meet up with Miller at a later time.
I was sent to Atlantic City from Florida, and when I got there, I found out that Glenn had plans to start what he ultimately wound up having, the best orchestra he could in the service and doing the most with it. He was going to start it in Atlantic City, and when I was transferred to Atlantic City, I was very much surprised when he walked in there this one evening when we were trying to figure out who and how and what I was doing there. And they didn't know anything about anybody being transferred or coming in. And so he told me about the plan.
A military band of giant proportions in the planning stage concludes the 11th hour of our 12-hour presentation of Glenn Miller, Memory Maker.